Hey there, resistors from all over the globe, Meidas Canada supporters, those who support the Meidas Network. Thank you for tuning in to this ongoing discussion about how we build resistance and we stand up together in this age of the gangster fascists. Today, we're going to talk about something that I call the Second Tower Principle. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. And yeah, Second Tower, you're thinking right. We're talking about 9/11 here, but we're not going to talk about 9/11 in terms of how it went down in the aftermath. Much of that's been covered, and we're not going down any of the conspiracy rabbit holes. We're going to use 9/11 and the Second Tower as a metaphor for understanding the times we're in. Before we get to that, though, I want to just give a shout out to the incredible responses that we're getting from all over the world. And it's really encouraging because, I think what part of the fascist authoritarian playbook is to make us feel isolated, make us feel alone, and we're not alone. We're in this together. So we get this beautiful message from Sweden. Yes, we see Canada as the line in the sand against fascism and lawlessness. We are with you. True North. Greetings from Sweden. Well, of course, Sweden, another Nordic sister country. So thank you, Sweden. This is from Georgia, Washington. Please know that the Orange Things administration is not indicative of all Americans. Over half our country in the United States is standing with Canadians. Elbows up. Thank you, Charlie. Love you always. Thank you, Georgia, Washington. Jake writes, unfortunately, being right next door to a dying democracy means that a small group of Canadians, Daniel Smith, Pierre Poilievre, etc., are watching and learning the playbook. Fortunately, however, being next door to the chaos means that the vast majority of us can hopefully see the warning signs. Well, Jake, that's exactly the work that we're doing here, trying to identify for people how the MAGA and authoritarian playbook is being used. And it is being used right now in Alberta. It's being used by MAGA Maple. And when we identify it, we can call it out. People can resist. So that's a big part of the work we're doing. This one just says, I had 4 uncles from Timmins, and Timmins is the town that I'm from, and one from Poland. And they all fought in World War II. And they'd be rolling in their graves over what they're seeing. Well, it's up to us to honor that legacy and to make sure that we don't have to let a young generation today go and fight. We have to stop fascism, and we got to smother it before it gets too strong. This is from Ron Hartley. Good morning, Charlie Angus. Kelowna, British Columbia here. Canada, strong, true north, and free from shore to shore to shore. Got that taco, chicken shit, orange, weak old man, traitor to the good people of the United States. Stand strong, Canadians. Hold the line, Canada. Boycott, boycott, boycott. The new Nazi country that is the United States. Bye-bye forever. Sorry, not ever. Elbows up. Team Canada, strong, strong. Thank you, Charlie, for standing up for all Canadians and the world against the traitor Trump land Canada. We are strong. Wow. Thank you, Ron, for that, and to all the good people in Kelowna. I'll be coming out to British Columbia in a couple of weeks. Looking forward to it. We got a lot of response on the piece we did on General Motors, the talk I gave to the workers, Unifor Local 222, and the need to build a wartime economy plan to make sure that we don't just keep taking hits to our manufacturing sector from Donald Trump, that we start to build a way of thinking about our economy that is very much like the wartime prime minister, Mark Carney. He ran to be wartime prime minister, so Mark Carney, you're going to have to do it. So here's from Doug. Retool Oshawa to build drones to protect us from America. Good point. Gerald Anderson writes, I'm a local 222 retiree. I retired in 2009. This fight with us started back in the 80s when we had 22,000 workers. I think Canada should build military equipment in Oshawa and tell Trump he can have his 5,000 General Motors jobs. Well, we're not going to give those jobs to General Motors, but I really thank you, Gerald, for this. We know that Mark Carney's Liberal team are watching Meidas. They watch us every day. So, guys, I'm just throwing it out there. Mark got elected as the wartime prime minister. He can do this. We need to be looking at ways of galvanizing our population, inspiring them, making them know that government has their back. This is not going to work if you just keep going down and you're quiet and you don't want to tell us anything because you don't want to offend the big orange monkey down in Washington. You got to be showing Canadians how we can do this. And we can do this. and we will do this because our future as a nation's on the line. So anyways, that's my editorial shout out to all those in the big guy's office who are typing away and paying attention. Okay, let's get to today's program, which is I call the second tower principle. You know, when 9/11 happened, we all know exactly where we were. We remember the shock, the horror, the images that just haunted us. And in the days and the weeks after, we were riveted to all the news programs coming out of 9/11. But, you know, many years after 9/11, I was driving in one of my long drives through Northern Ontario, and I was listening to a documentary on the CBC radio. And they were talking about 9/11 from a completely different perspective. And it's one that really struck me at the time and has stayed with me ever since. The question was, what about the people in the second tower after the first plane hit? They saw it up close. It was horrifying. People were freaked out. Many there, maybe the vast majority, went back to work. And why did they? And they interviewed a woman who watched the plane crash into tower number 1. And she said, we got to get out of here. And she started packing her bag and headed to the door. And her colleagues were like, don't go, you know, just stay working. It's okay. You know, there's stories of bankers who were on the 78th floor of the second tower, and they started going down the stairs to get out. And they got down to the 49th floor, and someone said, it's okay, it's all over. And they went back up. And none of those people got out. Just like none of the people on that woman's floor got out because they stayed. And so the documentary was looking at what people do in a moment of crisis. You know, there are actually 3 F's here. We often think of fight or flight as, you know, in a panic. What do? Your back's up against the wall. It's you either run, flight, or you fight. But there's another probably much more common response, which is freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. And when you freeze, is that you tell yourself it's going to go back to normal. It's going to be okay. You tell yourself that what you're seeing is so crazy. Well, it can't be that crazy. It'll go back to normal. We saw this, you know, and there's so many heartbreaking stories when the Nazis came to power of those who understood the threat and got out as fast as they could. And the other people who said, oh, it'll be okay. It'll go back to normal. He's just being Hitler. And all those people died in the death camps. So at what point do we understand the need to recognize the danger that we're in? It's always struck with me, that sense. You know, I was in Ottawa in 2014 during the shooting that happened in Parliament Hill, when we all had to hit the ground in our caucus room and we didn't know what was happening, and it was very, very disorienting, and people weren't making good decisions. And I remember the sense of shock that was on all of us, the sense that it was surreal. It couldn't be happening, not here, not us. And I remembered that documentary and thinking, I've got to be very aware of everything that's happening, because I saw people around me who weren't thinking clearly. And I was thinking of that 9/11 documentary, that when you see a threat, you have to understand the threat, and you have to be able to prepare for the threat psychologically in order to be able to respond to it. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at the fundamental question: is the first plane has gone into the Tower of Democracy? How many of us are heading for the stairs and figuring out we got to do something? And how many of us are still listening to people on the nightly news and the political channels saying, oh, it's all going to settle down, things are going to be okay? They're not going to be okay. So, you know, when was the point that you realized that first plane had crashed into the Tower of Democracy? You know, I'm thinking, I've been reading this book, really concerning book by Malcolm Nance, called They Want to Kill Americans. Malcolm Nance is a security analyst in the United States, and he wrote this in 2022. So this is before Trump came in the second time. And he writes, the goals of the Trump insurgency is not just to alter and co-opt the national dialogue, but to dismantle the framework of government and the Constitution itself. They openly advocate the destruction of America's diversity, multiculturalism, and equality. You know, this is what we're seeing. And yet we still see on the evening news attempts to sort of treat it as though it's sort of bizarre. It's kind of crazy. Well, it's Trump being Trump. It's a gong show as opposed to what it really is, which is the authoritarian takeover of the United States. I've told you, I've spoken with senior Democrats, good ones, who express their frustration that the party bigwigs are like, well, let's not do anything yet. Let's not step over the line. Let's wait for Trump to collapse. You know, those who believe that you can step back and wait as the cages are being built are the ones who end up in the cages. So I was just thinking there's a few examples just even this past week that shows this, that we are way past the moment when the first plane hits the proverbial tower. The image of that priest being shot by ICE agents from the roof of a building with a pepper shot. You know, could you have imagined that happening a year ago? And where will we be a year from now? Because soldiers who feel emboldened to shoot a priest or shoot a civilian with a pepper ball or a rubber bullet today will be shooting with real bullets in a year. Just look at Derry, Northern Ireland, 1972. Really concerning story of a professor from Rutgers who was targeted, who was facing death threats because he had done a lot of studies of anti-fascism, and he tried to leave the United States to fly to Spain, and he wasn't allowed on the plane. So think about that. An American citizen stopped at the airport. His name, obviously, the flight manifests. Who had that? Why was he being surveilled? Why was he pulled off the plane? Why is a professor getting death threats? This is the disintegration of democracy right here, right now. You know, you think of Donald Trump, and where was the point that you knew that this man was a fundamental danger to democracy? Was it the 30,000 lies that he said in his first term? Was it the Steele dossier that came out in 2016 that showed the deep, dark links between Donald Trump and the Russian security state? That dossier that was ridiculed and undermined in the media, even though Christopher Steele was the definitive expert on Russia, that he ran the Russia desk for MI6. This attempt to make it look like Donald Trump wasn't the threat that he was. Did you know that democracy was in threat when you saw Elon Musk giving the fascist salute on January 6th, not once, but twice? And what was it? The Anti-Defamation League who came jumping out and saying, oh, no, he was just excited. You know, when the Anti-Defamation League is downplaying the threat of fascism, you know we have a serious problem. So what do we do about it, my friends? This is the question that is probably the reason you're tuning in and watching what I'm saying day after day, is that we are the people who've seen that plane crash into the first tower of democracy, and we know what comes next. And what comes next has to be us getting down to the street level, to get out of the burning building of what's happening, and us getting our bearings, and us deciding we have to start taking back democracy. We have to start doing this, and we're seeing incredible acts everywhere. You're seeing really inspiring things in the cities where Donald Trump has brought the army out against the people, and I think it's encouraging people. But we need to see the intellectual class start to speak up more, and they aren't. We need to see the political class get some backbone. You know, I want to quote from this piece that always haunts me from Adorno and Horkheimer about the danger of this sort of the trusting this political class, these thinking class, to do the right thing. He says, one of the lessons of the Hitler period is the stupidity of cleverness. Clever people have always made things easy for barbarians because they're so stupid. It is the well-informed, far-sighted judgments, the prognosis based on statistics and experience, the observations which begin, I happen to be an expert in this field. It's the well-founded, conclusive statements which are untrue. Hitler was against intellect and humanity. But there is also an intellect which is against humanity, and it is distinguished by well-informed superiority. So what they're saying is that there are those that we often trust and defer to, who look down on all this talk of fascism and authoritarianism because they think they've seen this before. Well, they haven't seen it before, and they're failing at this moment. But you see it, and you understand. So what we need to do in terms of resistance is not defer to the talking heads, to not trust the pundits to explain a way out of this, because they are not going to get us out of this. The first plane has hit the Tower of Democracy. How much time do we have before the second plane hits the Tower of Democracy? That is the question of the second tower principle. What do you do? Do you freeze? Do you fight? Do you flee? Well, right now, a lot of the intellectual political class is frozen. Fleeing is not an option, so we fight. And we fight by getting active, by getting out there, by joining wherever you can join to start rebuilding and resisting the authoritarian threat. And I'm saying this obviously straight up to people in the United States, where it's ground zero right now, the ground zero in the attack on democracy. But that threat is spilling over all our borders. In Canada, we feel that pressure all the time. It's freaking us out. We know in Europe, you're feeling the pressure. You're feeling it in Australia. What's happening with the MAGA threat to democracy is a seismic shift, as was 9/11, that upended the first 2 decades of the 21st century. What's happening now is a very serious nature. So there is no fleeing here. There is no more being frozen and hoping it'll go away and saying, oh, it's not really happening. It's happening. So the resistance means we fight. We fight for democracy. We fight for our neighborhoods. We fight for the rule of law. So the United States, you guys are on the front lines. We are thinking of you, but you have to hold the line. The rest of us have to hold the line as well. And in Canada, you know what that means. It's the boycott, 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 boycott. Pressure your politicians. Make sure that they don't fall into this trap of thinking you can placate the threat that's south of the border. There is no placating that threat. So Canadians, keep the pressure on. In Europe, folks, keep the pressure on your politicians. Join the resistance by joining the boycott. Do not buy American products. Donald Trump is not going to stop until their economy starts to take serious hits. It's taking the hits now, but the pressure has to ramp up. We are fighting for democracy, folks. So right now, there's a whole bunch of us in those stairwells trying to get down to ground level. We're going to get down there. We're going to get our heads straight. We're going to figure this out, and we are going to fight back because of the 3 Fs. The only option right now is to fight and to resist. So that's my talk for today. Charlie Angus here. Thank you. Hit subscribe. Help us to get to 200,000 subscribers. This is a larger conversation about democracy that we really want to invite more and more people into. If you support the work, you can read us at the Charlie Angus Resistance Substack. So we keep kicking at that darkness, and it's going to bleed daylight. Thank you. Merci, Miigwech.